Welcome to Beating the Bounds, the Ylfe, or the elves in common parlance. I'm Ash Adams. Everybody here knows me, I think. I'm going to be reading to you some excerpts from the journals of a folklorist, J. Renwick Howe, of Harrowby House, Coleshill, Warwickshire, in 1941. As I sit at my desk and write, my child crouches by the fire and watches me. Allah is her name. Since her dear mother was lost in a boating accident, her body never recovered. I've done my best with Allah, but I fear grief and loneliness have marked her deeply. Often I'll come upon her out near the hedgerow, where she'll sit for hours, watching spiders weaving their webs. Or I'll find her singing to the birds, chattering and whistling as though they shared a common tongue, and were holding converse on subjects of greatest import. Sometimes Allah wanders barefoot from the house, to dance in the dew-laden grass beneath the full moon. When I lead her back inside, she is sullen and refuses to respond to inquiries of what led her to such rash actions. I worry, for the neighbors already think her mad and counsel their own children to avoid her. It hardly improves matters that Allah hisses at them as they pass and growls unintelligible sounds. It is as though she is determined to live in isolation from normalcy. Now if I slip and speak the old term, pardon me. In fact, the only time Allah shows a spark of childish interest any longer is when I read her tales from my folklore studies, collected from the shires and hamlets hereabouts. She delights in tales of the fair folk, the elusive and mischievous sprites that abound in local lore. When I began my studies, I referred to them as the wee folk, but Allah, even as a small child, would have none of that. "They're not," she insisted, and so vehemently did she object, red-faced and crying until I thought she'd turn apoplectic, that I was eventually forced to alter my appellation for them. So in my writings, they became the fair folk, or the hidden folk, which seemed to satisfy her. Now if I slip and speak the old term, she no longer throws a tantrum, but merely rolls her eyes and turns to face the fire, giving me her back. Once I thought to hear her mutter, "You don't know, you haven't seen." But I've learned now to simply continue my reading, and soon enough she turns back to me. I worry for her. I fear her fervid imagination is getting the better of her, and is proving an impediment to rational thought and her full recovery. I'm importuned by Allah to read the folk tales I have collected of the local legends. The shuck and the hob, the annis and the grim, redcaps and boggarts and Robin Goodfellow, but her favorite tales to hear about are of the elves. Ylfe, she demands I call them, using the old tongue. And so I read. Walk with me a time, my child. Take my hand, and we'll venture to the edge of the settled lands, down to where the meadowland gives way to a riot of bracken, where rabbits flatten paths through the sedge, and violet thistles sway, down to where the shadows beneath the trees are dark as the moonless night. Here we stand upon the margin. Beyond lies the wild. This is why parish priests beat the bounds yearly, enacting an ancient ritual that divides the known and the tamed from the wild and the perilous. A border that those who dwell on the other side should cross only with trepidation. You know it well, I read from her favorite book, for there you have played since you were small, darting in and back, daring the darkness of the thickets, of the ravine, lighting up the shadow places with your laughter. You were tolerated there, even, in your innocence, welcomed, but you were never alone. This is the forest's shore, the liminal verge where twilight ever holds sway beneath the boughs. This is where dwell the keepers of the hidden way. This is the land of the Fae. Here the clever lark sings stolen Ylfe songs, while a woodpecker drums in time. Heavy with pollen, drowsy bees careen through dappled streams of light. In its bed the stream laughs, wending its way to whisper forest secrets to the bay. Here the Ylfe reign over all the tracks and hidden ways, stream and hollow, copse and crag. Still and unseen they stand, watching, clad in bark and mail of moonlight silver, lacquered leaves and homespun from creatures never yet seen by man. As M. Douglas writes in Tales and Legends of Northumbria, the elf hills at Cambo were the haunt of the moorland elves, dressed in their brown and gold of the heather and bracken among which they made their home. On the margins of this trackless woods they wait, spears and darts in hand, fixed with blades of bronze, the ruddy hue of winter apples still on the branch, or bone points, white as wolf's teeth. flint-head arrows set to bowstrings, weapons all the more fearsome, for Ylfe shot carries curses and maladies. Respect them when respect is due. Fear them when fear is called for, and never rouse their wrath if it can be avoided. Ella laughs, like the Elston boy, the one who rubbed mud on my face and called me a witch. The boy who came down with fever last year? Ella nods, her eyes twinkling. I threw a flint at him and said the words. Words? The ones Mum taught me. She fell silent then, and no matter how I questioned, she rebuffed any of my attempts to learn more. I told her that children fall ill all the time. That certainly throwing the flint, though improper and unladylike, was entirely unconnected with the Elson boy's unfortunate malady. Ella merely smiles, and imparts a somewhat wolfish cast to her countenance. I shiver and continue. Though the birch and the oak, the holy trees, grow in the elfin woods, the veiled lady and the thunderer receive their offerings elsewhere. Whether the Ylfe revere them as we do is a mystery, though the Ylfe demand their due as well. We share the lady's bounty, we share with them the cream of fat cows and bread hot from the oven, slathered with butter. At the turning of the wheel, the year's dawn and its gloaming, the Ylfe receive other gifts, blood and meat, the fruits of life, and of life's cold end. As Jacob Grimm wrote in his Teutonic mythology, the hill of the elves, like the altar of a god, is to be reddened with the blood of a slaughtered bull, and of the animal's flesh, a feast prepared for the elves. In this we see the recreation of the first sacrifice, wherein the universe was created, and all of the beings within it. We reprise the slaughter of the first bull, the Ur-bull, to slake the hill's thirst. By this act, in a time outside of time, we are made mythic. And the world itself is made anew. Mountains and tidal deeps, the fields and the forests, the Ylfe's primordial home. The roof of the foliage, the tree trunk columns bearing the firmament, the Ylfe dwell within the wild temple that is the sacred forest itself. They are beings in the world, but not of it. Behold this leaf, child. Imagine that it is the land hereabouts. Upon it, I mark our location like so, and folding it carefully, you can see that where we stand is now touched by the other surface of the leaf. It is both distant and immediately present. Poking a hole through the folded leaf like so, why, we could step from one half of the folded leaf to the other in only a matter of a moment. Had one the wisdom and the means, of course. Ella giggles. After such a long period of sullenness, it is a joy to hear. But when I ask her the reason for her mirth, she merely shakes her head. Taking the leaf, she twirls it, then begins to poke countless holes in it with a twig. She's a puzzle, that child. And I admit I worry about her enigmatic, mercurial temperament, so like her late mother. I continue. The world of the Ylfe is that mark upon the leaf, touching our own at certain places. But while their world brushes against our own, their domains are wild and fey. Where you see only a grassy hill might stand an Ylfe stronghold, girded with a hedge of thorns, or encircled by a wall of rooted, close-growing trees. It could be that standards fly above cunningly wrought halls, that even as we approach, unknowing, lure horns sound the alarm that intruders walk their lands. But we hear only the honk of geese winging south, or the disgruntled croak of crows lighting in a tree nearby with a beat of ragged wings. As Tennyson wrote, "O hark, O hear, how thin and clear, and thinner, clearer, farther going. O sweet and far, from cliff and scar, the horns of Elfland softly blowing. Blow, let us hear the purple glens replying. Blow, bugle, answer, echoes, dying, dying." They are there, we share this land with them, but most have not the craft to see them, nor can our rough eyes note their presence, for they are made of finer stuff than we. In Folktales of Brittany, Elsie Mason writes, "In the middle of that wasteland, he saw the elves scattered among the huge stones, like sparrows in a cornfield. He was about to turn back when he heard the horns of the wood elves echoing behind him." Elf sight is a rare gift, sometimes given in stories to heroes who intend to brave the journey into the realm of faerie. Of course, like all gifts, it comes at a cost. Through the ages, my child, the memories of mortal folk have faded. Lost are the tales of times when we treated with the elf folk. traded even. Our kind wary, but ever eager for their secrets, for their wares, for safe travel through the gloam-ridden ways beneath the wood, over the how and haw of their lands, for timber taken from their margins, for riches cached beneath the soil, or locked deep within the stones, for cold waters drawn from their spring and stream. There is a toll to enter the other lands, the old woods that echo with the croak and flap as rooks bear tiding from afar, like the ragged twain who serve the one-eyed wanderer. But any longer that toll is seldom paid, the oaths spoken less and less often, until they are all but forgotten. And we have forgotten what we once offered. An old Midlands folk rhyme goes, "A penny for the passage, silver for the queen, gifts for the Owen folk who dwell in between." In the ancient tales, the gifts vary. At least one version of the rhyme reads gold to the Owen folk. Other gifts include mortal food, such as milk, butter, cream, and meat offerings mentioned previously. Crafts shaped by mortal hands also seem to be valued, for they demonstrate effort and skill seldom seen in these days. Yet never iron, nor iron's child, steel, for those are gifts that come with an edge, and in such an exchange blood will run. Iron is shaped by smiths who have their own magic, and it is not something Ylfin folk abide. In times past, each village smith, wielding fire and blood-red ore, wrought wards for their folk, bellows breathing life into the forge. Ore and coal, air coaxing star-bright iron into the crucible. Tools and talismans alike, the bones of the earth reshaped, molten magic steeped in each fold and hammered home. Each brooch and pin of iron, an apotropaic amulet, each shod horse, proof against fey glamour. So lay your iron aside ere you seek passage, child, for it is baneful to the fey folk. Bells are unwelcome as well. Too well do the Ylfin folk know that where church bells ring, within earshot dwell mortals with axes and swords and fire, mortals who bear malice for those who stand apart from their beliefs. I begin to read a passage about Ylfin ears, and how they are almost always portrayed as pointed, but Alla's laugh interrupts me. She brushes her hair back, and in an arch tone beyond her years declares, "That's just how scribes choose to show them. Make them appear like the demons of the Christ folk. Or how artists make them look different in paintings, so people could tell them apart from mortals. They don't have pointed ears." Well, she musters softly. Not most of them. I decide not to argue. I've learned when she is intractable in her fancies, and cannot be swayed, no matter how much the folklore might show otherwise. She's playing with her fair hair again, teasing the long, straight strands, which, when her fingers reach the ends, somehow spring back into tangled locks. Each morning I spend an interminable amount of time determinedly wielding a comb and brush to work out the snarled knots, and it always seems that in a few short hours Ella has somehow twirled them back into chaotic twists. "Tell me of the shape-changers," Ella asks tonight. She leans forward attentively. I try not to appear taken aback by her eagerness. She has no interest in school, nor, it should be said, had the school much interest in having her return. The headmistress declared her an incorrigible troublemaker, after Alla once tore her primer into tiny shreds and set those adrift on the millstream. I changed my book into swans. The words wanted to be wild. They didn't want to live trapped between the covers anymore, so I set them free. Ignoring her flight of fancy, I turn once again to one of my folklore books, relating some of the old tales wherein mortals who hunt the beasts of the woods report seeing human-like figures who appear to take on the form of deer. Of couples walking into a thicket, out of which bound a hart and a hind, while the thick brush, upon being searched afterwards, is empty. It is said that Ylfe can spin dwemmers too fine for the mortal eye to tease apart. Animals, or Ylfe in animal form, are by all accounts indistinguishable. Birds, harts, hares, butterflies, and wolves, of course. No fairy tale would be complete without them. Fell beasts who dwell far from the farmsteads, outliers, wary and hungry, preying upon the flocks of the crofters, roaming the hill and the vale. I tell her, too, tales of the monstrous black hounds coursing a surge of shadows through the greenwoods. The hunt of the fair folk is accompanied by many such beasts, often seen in pursuit of two-legged prey, for in all of the tales, Ylfe prized mortal souls most highly. Whether the hunt of the fair folk is related to the wild hunt of Anglo-Saxon England is unknown, although it seems highly coincidental that both are said to occur most often around Yuletide. Alla nods to herself, as if some piece of secret knowledge has been unlocked. She sits with her head bowed, tangled locks hiding her face. Her voice is low, barely above a whisper. Folk today. Most of them lack respect. They're not afraid. But they should be. She raises her head slowly and looks at me, her eyes dark, glimmering in the lamplight. They should be. When she kisses me on the cheek at bedtime, I shiver, for there's a sense of finality in it, an ending, and the whisper of a new beginning. The full moon's light washes her room in silver as I turn around and close her door. I know not what woke me, a half-heard sound, a dream no doubt, the faint distant peal of horns, their clarion call echoing over the forest and moors. Her door is open, her room empty. Running to the front entrance, I find it unlatched and ajar. Running now, calling her name, I follow a line of small footprints through the grass, outlined in glimmering drops of dew. The moon is caught in the fingers of an ash tree, limning the path in a dappled spill of silver. The footprints lead to a hedgerow where the tracks end. There I find her note impaled upon a hawthorn spike. Dearest father, beware the elven folk, who first wove the gnarled yew in knots, who whispered strength to the oak, who showed the ash how to grow true. Imagine that kind of patience. Imagine that patience roused to wrath. Imagine the love such patience can foster. When you enter the realm, when you brush against the boundaries, remember that the toll must be paid. A penny for the passage, silver for the queen, gold for the elfin folk who dwell in between. Find the words and speak them. The old rituals must be observed. Tread soft and linger not, if you have no intent to stay forever. For the veil may be thin, and the wild has good reason to be mortal weary. The elf honor binding oaths of truce and troth. She honors your troth. Crashing through the underbrush now, I run stumbling in the half-darkness, her note still clutched in my hand. You will feel it when you arrive. In your breath and your bones, you will feel it. I burst from the briar thicket, something metallic jangling in the pocket of my dressing gown. There are no shining towers here, no fairy tale spires glimmering, but I feel the change in the air nonetheless. On the wooded hilltop stands a white doe. A pale fawn climbs the hill to meet it. I reach into my pocket and draw out the coins Alla has placed there for me. Setting them on a fungus-ringed stump, I say the words and begin to walk up the hill. The doe and the fawn stand waiting, and I can see now that they are not alone. A horn sounds and fades to silence. In the summer of 1941, J. Renwick Howe and his daughter Alla vanished from Harrowby House, Warwickshire, under mysterious circumstances. His writings, including this journal, became part of the University of Warwickshire collection. Thank you.
Well done. Very good.
Questions?
That's really good.
That was really good. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
when you were researching in the Warwickshire libraries, what did you think about the theory that the reason elves have bronze weapons and bone weapons and flint weapons and are scared of iron is related to the migrant hypothesis of the changing nature of society in the British Isles?
You mean with the Iron Age supplanting
Cultures,
the Bronze Age
earlier cultures? Yeah. Do you would you feel that there are layers like that, or can we tangle them apart, or what are your feelings there?
I do think that plays a part in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the sacred nature of iron in almost all Iron Age societies is sort of anathema to the older ideas, where you have this itinerant smith often who wields magic that might be the equal of the local priests or mages or gothies or whatever you might call them, and therefore it's almost like a revolutionary new technology and new age that sweeps the old one out. So I think they're definitely connected.
Okay.
Anybody else? No? Okay. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Thanks. I think we're kind of blown away that you like actually wrote something so amazing.
Well,
Yeah, holy shit.
Yeah. It's just so beautiful. It's just so beautiful.
You started it
Bardic circles.
regular workshop and you turned it into a story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was beautiful.
I actually came
Freaking
here
blown away.
just with like point form facts, and then I was like, you know what? This just doesn't seem like it's gonna be enough, so I had to dress it up. So that's what I did
That's
today.
so this is
It
what
was-
he's been doing in the room.
Really?
Writing a
You did this
story.
today?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's
That was
freaking
amazing.
amazing.
That's
That was
weird.
really, really good.
Holy
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
insane. That's a gift.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good.
Well, I am impressed.
Thank you.